Good morning, Binge viewers. My name is Erica Becker, and I am here live on our influencer show. And I'm here with Tom Nardone, and he's going to talk about how he is a millionaire mailman, and he has a podcast as well. Before we get into that, I want to remind you that if you want to have a channel on Binge Networks and have your own show and be seen in front of millions of viewers, please go to bingechannels.com and it will give you all the information you need to know about joining, and you can apply for a channel. So without further ado, now we have Tom, and it's good to see you again, Tom. Last week we tried to record an interview. I believe it was on Tuesday, and for some reason something happened with the system and we had technical difficulty and the whole thing was not recorded. But we had a great interview, so of course we're going to bring him back and we're going to talk again. So good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Erica. How are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty well. It's pretty good. I'm started off my Monday and my week pretty well, so it's good vibes.
Good, great.
Yeah.
Same here.
So let's talk about first of all, I love your story, how you went from a mailman to an entrepreneur. And I love talking about the process kind of how that happened. So you became a mailman when you moved, correct?
Correct. Yes,
right.
I'm originally from your area, New York greater area. Yes. And moved to South Florida, of which now I'm in Fort Lauderdale area. Mm-hmm. And made that move, and I was just 19 years old, met my wife there at the post office. Mm-hmm. But much like maybe some of the folks in your listening audience that have had a blue-collar job, sometimes you scratch your head and wonder, is this my highest calling in life? And after I married my wife, she reinforced the fact that, no, that's not going to be your highest calling in life. She had a better lifestyle plan than the one a mailman paycheck was providing. So I find another way, and that's when I started buying houses.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel you're probably pretty happy about your wife having that mindset and pushing you to go beyond. Because now, look where you're at. You're flipping houses, and you have your own business, and you have a podcast. You're living the dream. So it's exciting. But it didn't always start off that way.
No.
In this way.
No, I mean, there's always a transition. When you're looking to break out of a mold, and I will say that when you're in a secure government job, such as the post office, it's like the hidden secret is you never quit that job. Once you're in, it's like, that's your death sentence. You stay there till you retire. But so when you try to excel from the masses, the people around me, I remember it was just the transition. Probably the hardest part about the transition to be an entrepreneur, breaking out of a 40-hour-a-week job, was the people around you didn't want to see you succeed.
And that was something we talked about last week, which I thought that was so interesting, the way that your coworkers kind of treated you when you were starting to give the idea, play with the idea of doing something else with your life.
Sure. In fact, that's how the whole cliquish name, Millionaire Mailman, got started.
Yeah.
So that's my website name is millionairemailman.com. Mm-hmm. The reason that name came about was I was being teased and razzed by my surrounding coworkers, and they were like, "Oh yeah, one day you're going to be the millionaire mailman." And well, it was just it was like throwing gas off the fire. It actually helped propel me at a faster speed to get out of there.
That's good. I love that you use that as a propel instead of, being insecure about it or letting it put you down or like second guess yourself. You thought, you know what? Then you're right. I will be a millionaire mailman.
Yep.
That is what's happening.
Yeah.
I love that you met your wife at the post office too. That's really cool. Was she was a mail carrier, or did she do something else in the post office?
No, she was also a mail carrier. So she lasted about 3 years, and then she was like, "You're going to go out there and figure the rest of this out on your own." So when she left, that's that's when, I started scrambling to find something that worked for me. We tried a couple different network marketing companies, and there's a lot of good opportunities there, but we just couldn't get it to work for us.
Hmm.
And fortunately, because I live in this Fort Lauderdale, Orlando area, there's a lot of conventions and seminars that blow through town. And back in the 80s, they had a couple guys that were on the no money down bandwagon, buying houses with no money down and all this stuff. So I was lucky that those people I learned from as my mentors were real. And I started listening to what they were telling me, and they helped me figure out an edge using my job as that edge.
Hmm. That is so smart to use the current job that you have when you're trying to get out of that job and into doing something else. You use that job to get you started with your new career, which was the house flipping. So let's talk a little bit about how you used that to your advantage. Your job as a mailman, how you use that to your advantage to get
Sure. I'd be happy to, Erica. Well, when you think about it, mailmen all day long, they either walk by houses or they drive by houses, and they see houses all day long. So my early mentors, back when I was starting in the 80s, remember, what did we not have in the 80s? We did not have cell
phones.
Basically, well, let's talk. It's easier to talk about what we did have. We had telephones, landlines, and we had the U.S. mail. That was like
even compute. I mean, there were computers, but it wasn't like super common for everyone to have. Like now, everyone has their own laptop, of course, or multiple laptops. But
Correct.
then, I mean, even in the 90s, I was born in the 90s, and we didn't get a home computer until I was about 10 years old. So.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing payphones and phone booths right up until the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you listening who don't know what a payphone is, I was phone you had to stick a quarter in. Okay. I'm sure you've got some young listeners out there. So,
sure, but I hope they know what that is from old movies or something.
I hope so, too. But nonetheless, how I got started and how I leveraged my job position was, as I mentioned, all day long I'd see houses. And back in the 80s, we kind of had a miniature real estate crisis, which was called the savings and loan crisis. It was kind of similar to the real estate crash we had here about 7 or 8 years ago, but on a little smaller scale. But when you think about my positioning in that crisis, I was a mailman, and the majority of the foreclosure notices to homeowners were sent through the mail. So it was my job to go up and knock on the door and face the owner face to face and say, I got a certified letter you have to sign for such and such a bank. And they look at me and they go, oh my gosh, I got to sell this house. Do you know anybody who wants to buy it? And I'd be standing there like, yeah, me.
I will.
Well, let me come back in the evening in my civilian clothes so I don't get in trouble with my supervisor. So that was how I got started, was buying houses on my mail routes.
So was that was that a little difficult to be constantly kind of giving these notices to people that were giving them such negative advice? I feel like it's similar to whenever people give papers like, you just got served. It's like that person, Was that kind of difficult to see? I'm sure there are some people who did not react too well to that.
If you're in a civil service job, we all have our things we have to do and maybe don't like to do. I mean, police officers have to give speeding tickets, right? I mean, so it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. All right. So you started selling or buying these houses, and you said you didn't flip them when you first started, right? Or you were just buying, kind of renting them out. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, I like to say I sort of started backwards in a sense, because most people today start by doing like fixing and flipping, or they wholesale the houses, which means you're not really going to fix it. You're just going to get it under contract and then assign that contract to somebody else for a quick fee and make a quick buck and move on. But I started buying and holding everything I ever bought. In fact, I left the post office at age 35, so I worked there from age 19 to 35. That's
It's a
16 years.
long time, yeah.
It is. It was a stretch, but I had a simple goal. Like I was going to buy 3 houses a year. So by the time
Oh, we looks like we just lost Tom. I hope that we can get him back on here. I'm gonna give him. Oh, here he comes. Hey,
hey,
did you get kicked? You it looks like you got kicked off.
how did I get kicked off? I know I've got, oh my gosh, I've got super Wi-Fi. I've got the fastest Wi-Fi speed of anyone I've ever seen. I don't know how that happened.
Well, you're back. So, to
Okay.
continue what you were saying,
Oh, okay.
you
Okay.
you had a goal of buying 3 houses a year.
Had a goal of buying 3 houses per year, and I reached that goal at age 35. I had 3 dozen houses I was renting out, and quite honestly, I was like stressed out because
A lot
I
of
was doing all the work myself. Well, I had no scale to it. It was all me, and plus I had that daytime job I had to
yeah.
show up at every day. So my wife said, "You're not going to work today. It's time for you to quit that stupid thing." And I was like, "Yes, dear." So
Yeah. All right.
I listened to my wife. So I left the post office at age 35. And then once I had my daytimes available, because I didn't have to punch a clock anymore, then
Right.
I started fixing and flipping. And to this day, 23 years later, I've probably done over 250 houses now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So fixing and flipping, because I love the shows on HGTV about that are all about the fixing up the house or the redesigning and all of that. That's so much fun to me. So do you have designers that you hire to help you, or are you primarily, good at the design part? And then I'm sure you obviously have to have, builders and carpenters help you out as
Yeah.
well.
In this market we're in right now, we're not staging the homes, so it's not like I really have to make any interior furnishing decisions. Yeah, which I'm probably not the best in furniture decorator, but when it comes to the colors, I did have about 20 years ago a good friend of mine who was an interior designer, and he basically said, just let me lay out your first few houses for you for fun. And once I knew the colors and the moldings, the baseboards and the cabinet styles and colors, which do change over time, we're doing
Of
things
course.
different today than we did 20 years ago, but essentially, all I have to do is give the paint numbers to my painter. He takes care of that. It's usually going to be white shaker cabinets. My cabinet guy knows what to do with that. We pick a granite that kind of works with an existing flooring if we decide to keep it. So it's pretty easy. It's now I just pretty much bark out the order and it gets completed. We had, in fact, since we last spoke, we had an entire kitchen installed. And right now, today, I just called the shop to see how they're doing on the granite tops. And they're cutting the granite today, and it'll be installed tomorrow, and it'll be on the market in about another week after we clean.
Oh, wow. So primarily it's about knowing what the house needs in order to be up to, a certain code of safety living, and fixing, I'm sure like things like walls and floors and ceilings. Is that kind of the main?
Well, the first part of it is, the functional part of the house. Like, how do we fix it to make sure that it's going to pass all the inspections? There's no roof leaks and, no rotten wood and stuff like that. So that's the first stage. But then we look at the house as to where it is. The house we're doing here is we call it kind of a lake home. It's not on a lake, but it's right next to one of the largest lakes in the United States, Lake Okeechobee.
Oh.
So the concept there is a little more of a lake home. The home we did before that was in like West Palm Beach, like just a mile down the road from Donald Trump's beachfront Mar-a-Lago mansion. So
wow.
And that house was like a little older, like Key West style kind of Cape Cod looking house. So we kind of went with that beach cottage look for that home. So
that's cool.
Yeah, we look at the house and try to decide, okay, what can we do to this house to make it really want to appeal to whoever's going to want to live in this
Sellable.
area?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yes, it's all about those kind of details. Make it
yeah,
very appealing to people.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
All right, so now that's primarily what you do, and do I'm sure that day that you quit your job as the mailman,
Hmm.
was that just like a free feeling, a weight lifted off kind of feeling that you felt?
Good question. It was
How did you
actually,
feel? Because that's
it's,
a job you were at for so long, but then it was kind of holding you back too. So,
yeah, and that's a great question because I'm going to say that probably like a lot of entrepreneurs that are standing on the edge of the cliff saying, "All right, it's time to jump,"
yeah.
I was jumping with a parachute. I mean, I already had some houses that were cash flow, but still, it was getting up my nerve to jump off that little cliff. So,
Yeah.
um,
To
now I
really
encourage
to the
people find
house.
a cliff and jump off.
Yeah.
That's what
To
it
encourage
takes.
them.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
no, it was a nervous experience. Yeah, I was sweating it out. My boys were younger. My two boys are now 28 and 30. So
Mhm.
now they're married, and at that time I felt a huge sense of responsibility. Like, wow, all the benefits that I was getting from this government job, the health,
Oh
the
my
life, and all that stuff. Now I'm on my own. This is scary. So, but you know what? It's once you learn to walk, then you start to run, and as it's just a learning process. It's kind of like the risk you take as an entrepreneur is kind of like a muscle, right? And
God.
the more you exercise it, like a risk muscle,
Yeah.
right? And the more you exercise that risk muscle, you take a little bit more risk on the next deal, and
Mhm.
before you know it, it's just commonplace to live
Comfortable.
with a few butterflies.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I can see how it would be uh, not a bitter, a little bit of a bittersweet kind of feeling like, oh, I'm so liberated. I'm going to pursue what I really want to be doing. But then also, like you said, the benefits you were losing, just the security of having that job is there every day, and a
Sure.
certain paycheck, um, that's gone. But it took a lot of, it was brave of you to jump full force in, but that's the only way I think that you can really be as successful as you become in this business is to go all in and put it all in.
Sure. It's like, you're going to take the island, you burn all the boats behind you.
Yeah.
There's no, you know, yeah, it's got that kind of thing. Um, so, now it's brought me to the point where now that I have a portfolio of homes that we rent out, there are long-term keepers.
Mhm.
And we always have a house or two that we're in the process of doing a fix and flip. And usually every month we have a house or two that we're just wholesaling and making a quick profit on flipping the contract to somebody else. So now I've come to the point where I'm teaching and coaching and being a personal mentor to others to do the same.
So let's talk about how that came about, which that has to do with your podcast as well, right? They kind of the
Correct.
subjects. So when did you decide that you wanted to start coaching and teaching and doing that a little bit more?
Yeah. It was as far back as about 10 years ago. A
Oh,
friend had said that, he had a lot of students. He had more than he can particularly handle at that one time. And he said, I know you're out on the streets doing this every day. You'd be really good at this. And I thought, well, I've never done it in that capacity, but I'm, willing to give it a shot.
mhm.
So then I started working with him, and he would give me some clients of his, some students that needed personal one-on-one mentoring. And that turned into working with some very national names that if people probably watch late night TV, they might even recognize some of
Yeah.
those names in the TV coaching space for get rich in real estate. So I work with them. I still am an outsource coach for other people, but I also have some of my own clients as well. And
Wow.
it's been very rewarding to not only share my experiences and as well as my failures and successes both together with them, it gives me a chance to network with them to do deals that they may not otherwise know how to do, and we both profit. So it's a very win-win situation.
Yeah, that's always the best when you're making something happen for yourself, profiting, but then you're also helping another person get that success as well. That's good. Like kind of passing on the knowledge. So when you first started trying to coach, it wasn't quite the easiest thing to get people to come and listen to what you had to say.
Correct. It's there's all, well, you mean from the standpoint of a marketing perspective and attracting coaching clients? Yeah, well, that in itself is
what's hard to get. Once you start talking, I'm sure we're interested, but getting the initial interest is always the challenge.
Correct. And the way we put ourselves out to the world today has changed quite a bit. I remember just 10 years ago when I was starting, I barely had enough internet speed to upload a YouTube video.
Oh my God.
And here we are doing live hangouts and so forth, right? On different social media channels, because now the speed is obviously no longer an issue. So, new marketing channels pop up all the time. So it's, I'd say for both you and I, being on both sides of this interview, it's always a challenge keeping up with the latest and greatest of technology, because I guarantee you it'll be different from a year from now, or
even 6 months, there's going to be something new.
Sure.
So how did you go then back? It was about 10 years ago, you said, that you started being interested in this. How did you gain the traction at first, at the beginning? How was that process?
That process was really, in the beginning, was just as an outsourced coach. And back then, and actually still now, we have a series of real estate clubs all across the country. If anyone in your listening audience has ever heard of a REIA club, which is REIA, Real Estate Investment Association, there's a national network of those at REIA.com. I think it's nationalrea.com. They can go there and find out where their local real estate club is. So I made a regular, I guess you could say, circuit speaking tour of all around the country telling my story, because how I got started as a mailman was very encouraging to other people who were trying to break out of a job. So I just started with a couple local RIAs here in South Florida. There's one in Miami, one in Fort Lauderdale, one in Palm Beach. So I got invited. Then word got out that, hey, invite this guy. And I started going further. I've been all out west and the Midwest. And it was a great chance for me to get some stage time speaking to people about what I do. And then started doing a few webinars here and there with some box products and some books that I had created about 10 years ago. And then became more of an online oriented person as we started doing webinars.
Okay. And if I recall correctly from last week, you had mentioned that you had one day offered to do kind of a talk for people in the community, and nobody showed up.
Well, if it's the instance you're talking about, where what I most recently started doing in my area was I really hadn't spoken in this area in almost like 10 years, but I've been all over the country speaking to different crowds and events and cruise ships. Seems like because I live so close to Fort Lauderdale and Miami, a lot of cruise ships leave from there. So I've been asked to speak on quite a few real estate cruises. But good old meetup.com, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Can't forget about
Meetup is a great place to learn about different subjects. That's how I initially learned about podcasting. Was I went to Meetup, and podcasters are kind of a rare breed. There's not a lot of them, but there's more and more popping up out there.
It's big now. It's getting big.
Yeah, it is getting big. But when I first found out about it about 2 years ago, it was a lot less populated than it is today. But
Yeah.
I went to a meetup group and learned a lot from the people. And I thought to myself, why don't I just do the same thing with real estate? Just have a meetup group right around the corner it's actually a local sports bar right around the corner from my house. So I started doing that about 3 months ago. The first night we had like 7 people show up, which I thought was awesome. And then the next time we had 12 people show up. And
Wow, almost double.
yeah, so our next meeting is on the 30th. So I'm just, just having fun with it, seeing where that goes.
That's cool.
And doing a local meeting. So that's how I got started in this whole thing 10 years ago was, if you could say the old-fashioned way, which I say the old-fashioned way by flying to a city and getting time on their stage. But when you think about the internet and your camera here being a stage to a national audience without having to leave my barn,
I know it.
I'm just as happy just staying here talking to you.
Yeah, it's so amazing how things have grown. So your podcast has been about for how long?
It's actually, I have several shows right now. I have like 5 shows in the can, and it's not out there yet. It will be. It's called Real Deals Real Estate Podcast. Real Deals, yeah. And it's going to be out there soon by Tom Nardone, Millionaire Mailman.
So will you be giving like advice on it, tips and tricks, just, little nuggets about the industry?
It's going to be a little bit of everything. For most part of it, the show is going to be interviewing brand new people who did like their first deal. Like, how did you get into this? How did you do that first deal? How much money did you make on it?
Yeah.
Because everybody's got a real interesting story to tell on that first one.
I'm sure.
And what were the lessons learned from it?
Yeah.
And, what was your worst deal? I'll tell you, we've I've lost money on a few deals. Everything looked great going in, but here I am in hurricane season. All you can do. I've literally bought homes before, and the home would be like, great, the roof's in good shape, and then 30 days later, a hurricane comes, tears the roof off. Well, I hadn't planned on that one.
Oh, so it's like you hadn't planned on that expense for getting a new roof.
Correct.
Kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Now there is insurance. There is such thing as insurance. So, but when you have 30-something houses and they all lose the roof on the same day, and then the deductible kicks in on all of them, that's a big number to add up.
So, do you remember what's the worst deal that you can remember that you've been through?
The worst deal was we lost, I would say, about $60,000 on.
Oh, no. What happened?
Yeah. It was, to make a long story short, we were looking at buying 55 units on the west coast of Florida from a bank, and this was in the crash about 6 or 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And what had happened was we put down $100,000. And after examining the title, we found that there was a glitch in the title that the sellers wanted us to accept the property. They said, no, we're not going to clean that up. And we said, well, we don't want a house. We don't want a project of 55 units that is anything less than 100% clear insurable title. And they wanted to exempt the one thing we needed fixed in the title because, to make a long story short, we were afraid that our buyers wouldn't be able to get financing with that glitch on the title. So we decided to pull out of the contract, and the bank said, well, if you pull out, you're not getting your money back. And we had put up $100,000. And then they said, I'll tell you what, we'll give you half back. And we said, that's ridiculous. We're under the terms of the contract. We're entitled to get all of our money back. And they said, sue us. So we said, okay. And what I've learned about that experience, here's the learning curve from that experience. When the lawyers on both sides representing both parties know that there's $100,000 tied up in escrow, let's go to Supreme Court with this. By the time we got whatever we won, but by the time we got whatever money was left, it almost all went to the lawyers. We would have actually been better off saying, just give us half back and we're fine with that because we got less than half back. Yeah.
Oh, and then you had to go through that whole ordeal too.
Yeah, it was just so unnecessary. But, it doesn't matter that it could be a major bank with a major name. I mean, the banks have shown us who they are over the last 10 years. And I won't get
Wow.
on a soapbox about that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But
that's a,
that blows my
yeah.
mind how they think that you signed a contract, you're under contract, and they think they can just not give you the money back. That just doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, it was black and white to us. That's why we said, yeah, let's go to court. The judge will certainly side with this, but just trying to get to the point of a trial. I mean, if another side wants to mess with you legally and they know that they've got $100,000 sitting there that they're going to get paid from first, then they're going to have a lot of fun with litigation.
Oh my God.
But that's the negative story. Let's go
Yeah.
180 degrees over to the positive story. Yeah.
It's interesting to hear the ups and downs of having your own business because it's not always easy. It's not. I mean, you are obviously living a life, I'm sure, that you much prefer to the day job. And I'm sure you get to do many, many more things that you didn't get to do before.
Sure.
But there are still those tough things. So now you also mentioned that you have a couple of books. So what are those books about? What are the titles? And where can people find those?
Sure. Well, the books I have are more or less like course curriculum books. Mm-hmm. So they have CDs and everything, and they're available on my website, millionairemailman.com.
Okay.
So that's what my main product right now that I offer to people is really coaching, like sort of a high-end coaching where they get a very one-on-one personal experience where I walk them through their first deal. Okay. And if we can work that deal together, then we'll work that deal together. So that's pretty much what I offer now is one-on-one mentoring. I currently have about 30 students. So wow. I'm selective with who I take, but
you are. That's cool that you can be that way. And I think you just answered my next question was, would you say that is what that's what takes up most of your time with your career is the coaching?
To a certain degree, what takes up the most of my time actually is not so much the coaching. It's really working the deal. So as students bring a deal to me that they're not sure what to do with it, the majority of the time is really spent working the deal and getting the seller to, concede to a contract and getting that deal closed, getting it sold. So I would say that's the most of my time.
All right. Yeah. And you... so time management is obviously, as an entrepreneur, one of the most important things and skills that you can work on, having good time management. Sure. You say that now versus when you first quit the mailman job and you were doing the house flipping, would you say that you now know you manage your time better now than then? And what are the things that you've learned about time management through the beginning of this journey to now?
What I've learned is you can't try to be this Superman and do everything yourself. You have to let go of portions of your business. I have a virtual assistant who works with me almost full time. She handles a lot of the clerical, web techie stuff for me. I do have yet another web techie person that I use. I have a bookkeeper who keeps the books. So I pretty much work with the students one-on-one because that's like my intellectual value that I add to the experience. Yeah. And then where I need to step in and negotiate with a seller, then I negotiate with a seller. But as far as being out at the property, I have people that are, the fix-up crew. I've got the kitchen guy. I've got the painter. I just use pretty much like a builder would. Everybody knows what to do when it comes to the hammers and nails of the house. It's I'm not going to be out there with a hammer and a nail. Right. It happens every now and then. If I'm out at a job site and I see something stupid and I can fix it in 5 minutes, I probably will. But I've learned to try to just compartmentalize and stay in my lane. Don't cross over into somebody else's lane. Right. I'll let them do their job and I'll do mine.
That's interesting. That's very, very true. I think very true. And Your my first interview today, she said a similar thing. I mean, we were talking about something completely different, but she said basically the same thing. Don't be afraid to ask for help was one of her biggest tips. And so that's interesting that you also are basically repeating. It must be it must be true. you
Yeah.
know, Asking for help, it doesn't mean that you are any less of a person. It's just you can't do everything.
Sure. And some of the stuff is not my unique ability, right? I mean, to sit down and go over the books and try to enter everything and classing it in QuickBooks, and no, I'd rather jump out a window
Yeah.
than do that. But my bookkeeper person, she loves that.
And
That's
she's
her.
probably great at it. And it just,
Oh yeah. She's like the librarian type. She's more soft spoken. For her to get on the phone with a seller and start negotiating some deal, that would be like she'd rather jump out a
do
window
it. Yeah.
than do that.
Well,
So,
your
if
strengths.
everybody works in their highest calling and in their unique ability like that, then that's what I think makes a company really successful.
Definitely. Going along again, sort of along the same lines as time management, I'm always curious to know how you balance work life with family life.
Good question. The way I do that is if I see something that's really, really important that I need to do, then I just make a hole in my schedule. And right after this interview, I'm headed straight over to the hospital because my son and his wife had their first baby last night.
Oh my gosh,
And
congratulations.
yeah, thanks. So I'm a grandpa for the first time.
Your first grandchild?
First
Oh,
grandchild,
wow,
yeah.
that's so
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So
that's so much fun. Oh, you got it last night. They had it last night.
Yep. Baby was born late last night. So we're headed over there today,
Oh,
and
girl.
they weren't ready for us this morning. I thought, oh, do I tell Erica I can't show? I thought, because I got to go to the hospital, but my son was like, no, we need some time to get ourselves together. They haven't slept in 2 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah, don't come
I
to like 3 o'clock. So
yeah.
so
Okay.
there.
Well, I would have understood, for the record, I would have totally understood.
Yeah.
Family comes
Yeah.
first, but
Sure.
um, but that's really exciting. Is it a boy or a girl?
We wanted to be surprised. We're not going to know till we walk in this afternoon. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be a fun afternoon.
Yeah. We're
So
looking forward to it.
yeah. How many children do you have?
I've got 2 boys.
Two sons.
Yeah.
So when you were starting, how old were they when you quit the mailman job and became
Yeah.
a housekeeper?
They were actually, I think, about like 6 and 8 years old,
Mm-hmm.
right around there. Because a lot of times I'll ask them, don't you remember Daddy driving home with, parking that mail truck when I would come home for lunch in front of the house? And they're like, no, not really. I'm like, oh,
You're
brother.
pretty young. Yeah.
So that's okay. I got
So,
enough pictures of me back then.
oh yeah. So you had to. So I'm sure then it was a little bit of a challenge to balance. You have this new entrepreneur career that's not a scheduled 9 to 5 necessarily. Trying to grow, and then you also have two young sons and a wife,
Yeah.
and so I'm sure that was what was challenging. The most challenging thing about that situation, would you say?
I would say that the most challenging thing was because I was trying to do everything myself and I really didn't have the extra dollars it took to like hire other people to get
Right.
stuff done that
Not yet. Yeah.
I was younger then and it didn't really hurt me to go and put in a 16-hour day because I was physically able to. And
Right.
I could still put in a 16-hour day. I'm not like crippled or anything, but nonetheless,
But you could.
I did as much as I could in the late evening hours when it came to paperwork and bookwork after the kids were in bed because I didn't want to jip them out of time with them.
Yeah. Sure. Well, that's smart. That's a
Yeah.
smart way to handle it.
Well, I should also mention this was a huge help too. Was my wife homeschooled our children, so
Oh.
they were home most of the time.
Oh, that's
And
that's
yeah,
nice. So your wife,
yeah.
what she quit the mail carrying job a while before you.
Yeah, she was
And
about 26 when she quit.
okay, so she quit, and then what did she go? Did she want to be a stay-at-home? Did she do stay-at-home mom, or did she go into some other career?
She did a couple like direct marketing things where she would do home shows that were based around selling jewelry and stuff like that. And she kind of
Oh,
got into a couple network marketing opportunities like that. And she did fine with that for a few years. But then when the sons became of age and they were, well, even from the time they were born, she really just wanted to be a full-time mom.
stay home,
So
and yeah.
yeah, so that was her number one pursuit. And then, spending the time schooling them, I almost always had an office either close to the home or somewhat in the home. In this case, as you could probably tell, I'm in some kind of a barn. So, but this is a nice barn. It's my office now, but the home is about 100 feet in the front of
Okay.
the property. So, well, the kids are long gone. Now we're empty nesters living in a big house on acreage. And so now we're figuring our next move might be closer to the beach in a smaller place.
Oh,
So,
very nice.
yeah.
Well, so it sounds like that's interesting. You guys, your family didn't have the typical schedule of the average American family, I would say. You didn't have dad going to work from 9 to 6
Right.
and kids
Yeah.
going to school from
Right.
8 to 3. You guys were kind of all home a lot, which is interesting. How would you say that was like the dynamic of that for your family? How did that affect you guys in any kind of way? Like positively?
Well, yeah, I would say in a positive way. Well, when we started homeschooling our kids, it was actually at a point where back in the late 80s when they were really young, it was almost like illegal. Now, don't get me wrong, it was not illegal. It was legal, but everyone would say, "You're going to mess your kids up.
It was
They need all the
harder.
social interaction." So
Hmm.
I'm a product of the public education system in New Jersey, so I know what that did for me.
Hmm.
We went to a lot of wild parties
Yeah.
back in the day, but nonetheless, people assume that the interaction you get in like a full school system, a public setting, is all good. I mean, there's negative things that happen when a kid is away at school, as
Oh,
well as there's positive things. So in the home,
there's pros and cons to both,
you,
for sure. Yeah.
yeah, we had our own circles of people that we can hang out with. We had the other homeschoolers, and it was cool because we would set our own schedule.
Yeah.
And if
Great.
a kid gets his assignments in 2 hours, right, instead of stretching it out for a full 6 or 8 hour day, like a regular school setting, if he gets the assignment or the goal of the day, then he gets it.
And then he can be done.
Yeah, then he can be done. and
Something else.
and dad can take him on a class field trip along with some of the other kids. So we've gone on some really cool class field trips. I mean, we've gone on jet rides, helicopter rides, some really cool stuff by guys that were airline pilots and helicopter pilots. So we've done some cool stuff.
Cool. What did you guys was it your wife's idea to homeschool the kids or yours, or did you both kind of want that for them?
It was primarily her idea. We knew of just a couple people that were doing it because, as I mentioned, in the early days in the late 80s, there weren't a lot of people doing
Yeah,
it.
I know.
Now it seems very commonplace now, but
More.
we literally had to band together as a group to have literally legal representation because there were times where the public system would come and try to attack you saying, hey, you need to send these kids to school. But having some legal representation, I'm happy to say I live in Florida, and Florida was one of the early pioneers of the homeschooling movement. So they did have statewide representation that if anybody ever called to say your kids were truant or something, why aren't they in school, then
Oh my goodness.
you had somebody to stand
Think
behind
about
you and
that.
hold the
Yeah.
authority. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's an interesting family life growing up in Florida. That's really, really cool.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I love the freedom of making your own schedule. I love that scheduled work times they just feel so like do your you can't do as much as you could do. You couldn't, I feel like they just bind you. So that's great that your kids kind of their whole life have had that nice, ability to have, not necessarily sticking to that typical day, like school day, being trapped. You probably didn't feel as trapped, which is a great feeling.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
So before we sign off here, I want to just really quick tell everyone where they can find you and where they can find when your podcast, when you get that together, where you're planning on putting that up, and how they can get in contact with you if they're interested in being coached and getting into this real estate and house flipping business, because it's a big one. There's always going to be homes and houses to flip in real estate. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of interested people. So where can people find you for this information?
Sure. The best place to find me is at millionairemailman.com. And we have a free ebook that they can download there about getting started in real estate investing.
Oh, great.
And finding houses. Yeah, I'll tell you soup to nuts, everything to look for. Pretty much lays out my whole business plan to people to see. So
you're giving that away for free?
Yes, correct.
Wow. Cool.
They can find that
anyone who's interested, anyone who's interested, take advantage of that on the website, millionairemailman.com, for sure.
Sure.
And the podcast, what's going to happen with that?
Yeah, Real Deals Real Estate Podcast.
Real Deals.
That is going to be hitting. Our launch date to really go live is like 60 days from now. So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Looking forward to getting the message out there.
Yeah, that is. I'm sure that your guys are going to have a lot of listeners and downloads. I'm sure that will be a huge success. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on again with me on Binge Networks. I'm glad that our interview is successfully live and will be posted today, because you have a great story and people should definitely hear it.
Thank you, Erica.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. And congratulations again on becoming a grandpa.
And thank you. Yeah.
Have a good time this afternoon. Yeah. Have a good time this afternoon. That's so exciting.
I will. Thank you so much.
And for everyone who's watching, don't forget that if you want to have your own show and have a message that needs to be shared, check out bingechannels.com, and you will find everything you need to know on there about what you would get having a channel with us on Binge and what it takes to apply. So please check us out there. And thank you again, Tom, for being on our influencer show on Binge.
You're welcome.
And we will sign off here, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of the day.